So I am at 2.5 months of quitting smoking weed, and I am very happy that I have quit smoking weed. I was a slave to weed for 7 years, and I didn't realize that I was addicted to weed until I was smoking it for 4 years. And then I spent 3 years praying to whatever is out there to help me quit. And I would be, while I was lighting bowls and smoking joints, I was praying to eventually be able to quit smoking weed. It felt like an actual form of slavery and bondage. It was an addiction that I had formed, and a lot of people are in denial about their addiction, I think, especially to marijuana. I certainly was for 4 years, and not even necessarily a complete denial of it, but a lack of realization that I was addicted to it. And it slowly dawned on me that I am an addict with marijuana. And that was such an interesting realization, because I remember realizing it. And I write a lot, and I think that writing sort of helped me realize it. But you know, when I realized it, it was a hard pill for me to swallow. It was difficult for me to accept, because I grew up, learning about, with this idea of what an addict is in my mind, and it was people who are strung out on the streets. That's why it was a hard pill for me to accept that I had become one, because I just thought, I'm not the type of person to be an addict, I thought. But I realized I was. So, if you're watching this, I know you're watching it because for, one of two reasons. You're either in recovery for some sort of substance, or you are trying to quit smoking weed and you are looking for help, or you're looking for motivation to quit. So my experience with smoking weed is that it felt like it was my best friend and my lover at the same time. And God himself appearing to me would not have made me quit smoking weed until I was finally so sick of my own behaviors that I stopped on my own. And the last straw for me with smoking weed was developing it felt like some sort of respiratory and sinus infection from smoking a wax pen that was so synthetic. It was a pumpkin muffin flavored wax pen. And it was from a brand that I always smoked, that I really liked because of how strong the wax was. And I wanted to feel a certain level of high, and that wasn't something that I was going to, I'm trying to think of the right word. I can't think of the exact word. Oh yeah, almost like I wasn't willing to sacrifice the type of high that I was looking for, so I would go to the same brands that I knew would get me to the level that I wanted. And this was a wax pen from a brand I really liked, and it was just such a synthetic flavor, I think, that it made me more sick than weed usually was making me. And I just realized, I don't know, I just hit my threshold of being so disgusted by my use. And yeah, and weed was giving me mouth cancer. Yep, that's right. I went to the dentist, and my dentist told me, he said, "Do you smoke concentrates?" I said, "Dentist, how do you know that? How can you tell that?" He said, "I see white spots forming on your gums right here." And if you keep doing that, you're gonna develop mouth cancer. And you know what I did when my dentist told me that? I quit doing dabs and I started smoking bowls. I started smoking flour. I thought, you know what? I'm going too hard, clearly, with the dabs. I will lower to just flour. And then my lungs eventually really suffered because I would smoke bowl after bowl, and I would cough up black tar, and it was disgusting. And then I went to wax pens instead of straight dabs on the rig or flour for the sake of my lungs. Yeah, so these past 2.5 months, I have not had cravings for weed at all, really. I don't even think about it throughout my day. Now there are just things I would rather be doing instead of smoking weed. Like taking care of myself, honestly, in better ways. And I actually have a funny story about weed. So I recently had a surgery done for a metal removal from an injury that I sustained a year ago. And when I was in the hospital for the initial surgery, emergency surgery, I was getting IV Dilaudid. Dilaudid is a very, very strong opiate. It is so strong that as soon as the nurse started pushing the Dilaudid into, or Dilaudid, I don't know exactly how to say it, as soon as she started pushing it into my IV, I would completely stop feeling the pain of my broken leg. And I was so addicted to weed that I had a family member bring me my wax pen while I was still in the hospital. And then I was smoking my wax pen while I was off of IV Dilaudid. And that is extremely dangerous because they are both central nervous system depressants. And I was just gambling with my life and my health and completely risking it without even realizing how dangerous that combination was until I did more research later, because I thought, ooh, that's probably not right to be smoking weed on top of receiving IV opiates. And it turns out it's nothing about that is right. And another scary thing I learned about smoking weed is that when I was in the hospital and they had to reset my bones, they administered me propofol for the resetting, which is when the doctor pretty much takes your bones and puts them back into place. It's disgusting. And propofol is kind of like a twilight anesthesia that it makes you don't remember what happened while you're under it, but you are still moving around and making noises. So there were paramedics, or I don't even know what, I think they were EMTs. They were holding me down while I was administered the propofol and while the doctor was resetting it, because I was like moving and groaning. And they had to give me so much propofol, more than the normal amount for a person. I remember the doctor would say, count down from 10 while he's injecting it. I'd count down till 10 and then I would restart counting down, and they kind of looked at me and kept administering more. And I learned that because I had such a high tolerance to THC, that that is the reason I had to be administered so much propofol, which is very disturbing, actually. And the more I did research, I learned that the THC receptors are located in your spinal cord very closely to the opiate receptors. And if you have a high tolerance to marijuana, then you're going to also have a higher tolerance to opiates. And that can be extremely dangerous. And that is why if people are super heavy stoners and they go under anesthesia and they do not communicate to the doctor that they smoke a lot of weed, because they're either embarrassed about it or they don't realize that there is a drug interaction with anesthesia, they might wake up from the anesthesia early or before the surgery's over. So they'll wake up like during the surgery because the anesthesia, not enough anesthesia was administered for the type of tolerance that they have. And that is bad news if you are a stoner and you are ever in an emergency situation like a car accident and you can't speak and tell them that you're going to need more drugs administered because of the drugs that you use. Yep, and I think that a lot of people, they think you have to be abusing opiates or hard substances for there to be drug interactions like that, but weed will also raise your tolerance to opiates as well. So yeah, I almost forgot to film this video today, but I'm really glad I did because I'm trying to post every Tuesday an update of quitting weed, no matter what, no matter if I feel like shit that day or don't want to that day. So what is my advice if you're trying to quit smoking weed? I really don't think that I would have quit smoking weed unless if I hadn't changed my diet. And the way I changed my diet was upping my animal protein intake and cutting out sugar and cutting out carbohydrates, besides the carbohydrates and sugar that I get from milk. But I think that because cleaning up my diet improved my mental health so much, my desire for smoking weed, it doesn't even exist anymore. I don't even have cravings anymore. Thank God for that. I really hope it stays that way. And that's also one of the reasons I'm making these videos too, is because I will talk about it if I do smoke weed again, or if I do feel like I want to smoke weed again, but I don't even want to use it anymore. And I smell weed all the time, around me and in the place that I live. And even when I smell it, like to just take a full inhale of somebody's blunt, I'm not like, oh, that makes me want to smoke. I don't know. And I used to never, when people would say that their cravings for their drug went away, I used to never believe them. And I didn't believe it until I experienced it for myself. But it was after years of failed attempts too, and after years of pretty much praying to, the universe to release me from my bondage to the substance. So don't let anyone fool you. Weed is addictive. Weed is like a termite that will just undermine your life. And weed is disgusting. Smoking weed is disgusting. If something is wrong in your life if you want to smoke weed every day. There is a lifestyle issue. There's a problem with the way that you're living or things that you haven't processed or dealt with. I highly recommend basically going carnivore almost, as well as writing a lot, like start journaling every single day. My sleep is so much more improved. My REM, my rapid eye movement, so dreaming, was so disrupted by smoking weed, and I am just a lot more in touch with myself since I quit. And I used to, every single thing I felt or occasion, I turned into an opportunity to smoke weed. And I remember even if I was super tired, I would smoke weed for some reason. And now when I'm super tired, I just go to sleep. So, have a good one.